Assalamu alaikum. It's just a response to a question that I received earlier from one of the groups. So a question was, or something was said that we shouldn't follow a madhhab or these sects because these were later developments or due to certain reasons or political reasons. So hence we should follow directly the Qur'an and Sunnah. And these madhabs and these sects, they went around at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, so we don't need to follow them. So we just follow the Prophet ﷺ, Quran and Hadith, or Sunnah directly. Okay, so I'm just going to go through this misunderstanding. So inshallah, after a few minutes, we should all understand what madhabs are and why we follow a madhab. So firstly, Allah says in the Quran, يا أيها الذين آمنوا أطيعوا الله وأطيعوا الرسول وأولي الأمر منكم. That, O you who believe, follow Allah and follow the Messenger and follow those in authority amongst you. So the first thing you have to do is follow the Quran, which is obvious. And second thing, follow the Messenger. And number three, there is a third person Allah tells us to follow, which is the Ulil Amr. And many of the Tabi'een, the success of the Sahaba, they said, what does it mean by the followers? I.e., the fuqaha, the jurists, the scholars. So Allah is commanding us to follow the scholars in the Quran. And number two, in another verse of the Quran, Allah says, فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنْتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. So ask the people of knowledge if you do not know. So Allah is, when a command comes to us or a ruling, we're in need of knowing a ruling, Allah is commanding us to ask the people of knowledge. Okay, so now, so that's the first thing that we've established. Allah wants us to follow the scholars and the jurists. So along with following the Quran, along with following the Hadith, we follow the jurists and the scholars in Islam as well. Okay, my second point is, in terms of the people, there are two types of people. Either you are a mujtahid or either you are a muqallid. So a mujtahid is a person who has the expertise and the qualifications to take directly from the Quran and the Sunnah. So they have expertise in Arabic language, in Arabic grammar, morphology, in all the sciences related to Arabic. They have expertise in the principles of the Quran, in the abrogating, they understand the abrogating verses and the abrogated verses, the restricted verses from the unrestricted verses, from the general verses to the specific verses, and so on, so on, so on. So they have complete expertise from from a lifetime of studying the Quran and Hadith, and these people are able to derive directly the laws of Islam from the Quran and Sunnah. So this is what you call a mujtahid, and these people are very rare. Or if you're not a mujtahid, then by default you fall into the category of a muqallid, a person who does not have this expertise. They are a follower. So now when we want to know a ruling of Islam, we must ask a mujtahid. So that's how we understand the rulings of Islam. Because we don't have the capability and the tools and the knowledge to go directly to the Quran and Sunnah, we need to ask those people who can, which is clear, which is logically understood. Okay, so that's my second point. My third point, in those rulings which are clear, you do not need to follow a scholar, and you do not need to follow an imam or a madhab. For example, do I need to pray 5 times salah or not? Do I need to give zakat or not to I'm wealthy? Is backbiting haram? Is drinking alcohol haram? So these questions are absolutely clear. So in these questions, we do not need to follow an imam because these are clear. We can follow the Quran, Hadith, Sunnah directly in these matters because there's no ambiguity in them. Now, in those rulings which are unclear, or the evidences aren't so clear in the Quran and Hadith, so now I can't go directly to the Quran and Sunnah because the evidence is vague, or there's contradictory evidence. For example, one Hadith says it's permissible, another Hadith says it's impermissible. So hence, or for whatever reason, the evidence is not clear, or the evidence is not mentioned in the Quran and Hadith directly. So now what do I do there? Now I need to follow the opinion of someone who can derive laws from the Quran and Hadith. So here I can't follow the Quran and Hadith because the evidence is not so clear. Okay, so so now what is a madhab then? Okay, so what a madhab is in those rulings where the Quran and Hadith is not absolutely clear. So when something is not absolutely clear, there is room for differences of opinion. So when this is not clear, I may have an opinion regarding this. Another qualified person may have an opinion regarding it. Another qualified person may have a different opinion regarding it. Why? Because the evidence is unclear, so hence it's open to interpretation, isn't it? Or people understand the evidences differently. So now, what is a madhab? A madhab is in those issues where the ruling is unclear in the Qur'an and Hadith, a jurist has his own principles and methodology of understanding these differences, and he gives his own opinion. So this is basically what a madhab is. An opinion in terms of principles and methodology of deriving rulings from the Qur'an and Hadith, those rulings which are unclear. So this is what basically a madhab is. So now the objection is, okay, there weren't madhabs in the Prophet's time, so and people didn't follow a madhab then. So today we shouldn't follow a madhab because madhabs didn't exist. So now this question, you can see it does not really make much sense, because the reason why there weren't any madhabs in the Prophet's time is because whenever a question would arise within the companions, they would directly go and ask the Prophet ﷺ. There was no conflict of evidence. There's no such thing as the evidence was vague or unclear. They would just go directly ask the Prophet ﷺ, and that's it. The problem would be solved. Now that the Prophet ﷺ is no longer with us, we have many new issues arise, and we need to know the answers. Now we can't just go directly to the Prophet ﷺ. And the evidences that we have from the Qur'an and Sunnah are vague, which is open to different interpretations and different understandings. So hence, who should I ask now? Now I need to follow a scholar. Okay, so that's the first thing. So this is why we follow a madhab, is because we can't follow in these matters. Me as a layman, or we as general public, we don't have the expertise to follow the Qur'an and Hadith directly. So hence, we need to follow the opinion of an expert jurist. And in the message that Shah received, the madhabs and sects were seen as one thing, whereas madhabs are different and sects are different things. A sect is a difference in terms of a person's belief. So in Islam, there were many different sects that came about. For example, the sect of the Qadiriyya sect, who believed that we have absolute free will, and Allah does not know what I'm going to do before I do it. Or we had the Jabriyya sect in the past, who believed that humans do not have free will at all. Allah forces us to do good deeds and bad deeds. So we had different sects. Or we had the Mujassima, for example. Mujassima was a sect that believed that Allah has a body just like we have a body. So these are what you call sects. So sects are in terms of belief. Now, from amongst the different sects of Islam, we have the sect of Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, those people who follow the Hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, and those people who follow the Sahaba. So we all adhere to this sect. Now, within this sect, who follow the Prophet ﷺ, who follow the Qur'an, and who follow the Sahaba, within them, in terms of law and deriving rulings, we have different groups. Okay, so we have different groups in terms of deriving ruling from the Qur'an and Hadith. So like I mentioned, in those matters where the Qur'an and Hadith is vague, it will be open to different people. Different scholars will understand it differently, depending on the evidences that they have in front of them, depending on the principles and the methodologies that they use. So some scholar would have understood it one way, another scholar would have understood it one way, and these understandings of these scholars, over time they became into schools of thought, because people generally followed the understanding of the greatest scholars to come, the earlier scholars, which were the earlier scholars. So that's the first thing. So sects and madhabs are two different things. So within a sect, you have many different schools of thought, you have many different madhabs. So now the question is, should everyone just abandon all the madhabs and follow the same thing? Now again, this is logically impossible. Like I mentioned, when something is unclear and something is vague, if someone that has the ability and expertise to interpret the Qur'an and Hadith, they're going to interpret it according to how they understand it. So now if you have five different smart people in the room, for example, they will have different opinions, and you can't force everyone to follow the same opinion, because if someone's knowledge leads them to a different opinion, why would they follow your opinion? It would not make sense, either because they don't care about religion, so they're going to ignore what they think is right and follow your opinion, or they don't have the expertise to interpret Quran and Hadith in the first place, so they're going to just follow whatever you're saying. So when you have expert qualified scholars, when they interpret it, and you have many expert qualified scholars, you will get differences of opinions. So that's natural, and differences of opinions were in the Sahaba. They were, they came to us from the Sahaba, from the Tabi'in. Differences of opinions have always existed. And does Allah want everyone to just follow one opinion? No. Because of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, that he said, the Prophet ﷺ asked one of his companions, I believe Amr ibn al-As or another companion, he asked the Prophet ﷺ asked one of his companions to judge between a matter. And the companion said, should I be judging between the people while you are amongst us? And the Prophet ﷺ, he gave him a response that if you try and work out the answer and you get it wrong, you'll get one reward. So Allah will still reward you even if you get the answer wrong. But if you work out the answer and get it right, then Allah will give you 10 rewards. Okay, so now the mujtahid scholar, this is for an expert scholar, by the way. You can't just be a layman and start interpreting Quran and Hadith. And if you're wrong, then that'll be your fault. For an expert scholar who tries his best, utilizes all the knowledge that he has, and he tries to come to a conclusion, even if he's wrong, he will be rewarded. Yeah. So now this shows us that Allah does not require everyone to just follow one ruling and that's it. And whoever does not follow this ruling, they're going to go to Jahannam. No, there's scope for differences of opinion. And that's shown to us by the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. Okay, so what we've established so far, we've understood what sect is, we've understood what a madhhab is, and a madhhab is it will be there. There's no such thing that we can't be without a madhhab. Okay, so we've understood that. Okay, so now which madhhab should we follow? Now, okay, so since we are muqallids, we are not mujtahid. I do not possess the qualifications to interpret the Qur'an and Sunnah directly, so hence I'm a muqallid, I must follow. So now the question arises, who should I follow? So now, in terms of who we follow, is the greatest people and the best people to follow are the earlier scholars who came just after the generation of the Prophet ﷺ, or who came just after the generation of the Sahaba. For example, we have Imam Abu Hanifa, who saw many of the Sahaba. He was born in the 80th year after Hijrah. So these people, they're very close to the time of the Prophet ﷺ. They saw the Sahaba, they saw the Tabi'in, the followers of the Tabi'in, and they were giants, they were imams in Qur'an, Hadith. So if we want to follow someone, why follow someone who's alive today? Why follow the opinions of the people who are alive today? Why not follow the opinions of the people who lived very early in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, who themselves saw the Sahaba radiallahu anhum? So when you want to follow an imam or follow an opinion of a scholar, why we should follow those people who lived closer to the Prophet ﷺ, because they would have understood the Quran and Hadith better than the later scholars. So this is why you follow a madhhab of the scholars of the past. So now let's go back to the original question, that forget following sects and forget following madhabs, let's just follow Quran and Sunnah. So now you can see why this objection, or this, it does not make any sense. It's a complete misunderstanding. Okay, so now just since I'm discussing the topic, so now why there are only 4 madhabs? In history, in the past, there were not only 4 madhabs. After the time of the Tabi'in and those that followed them, there were many madhabs. Imam Awza'i, for example, had his own madhab. Layth had his own madhab. Tabri had his own madhab. Each scholar, imagine different towns, and each town would have their giant scholars. So these giant scholars would be like madhabs in themselves. So they'll have many students, and they'll teach them their understanding of the Quran and Hadith. They're using their own methodologies and using their own principles. So these were like madhabs that existed. But over time, for a madhab to survive, you need prominent students who will spread your teachings to other places, and then they'll have students, and they'll have students. Organically, it grows until, until it passes us down today. But what happened was, these other madhabs which existed in that time, their students, they died down, or they didn't have many students, or for whatever reason, or many of these madhabs, they became subsumed into other greater madhabs, until, as time went on, we were left with 4 madhabs, which the whole world, the whole Muslim Ummah accepted, that these 4 madhabs are correct and they're authentic, and you can follow any of these madhabs as you like. And whichever madhab you follow, you will be guided to the right path. And no one from history, they disagreed with this, because even if, let's say, a madhab is wrong in an opinion, we heard the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, that the madhab the scholars who done their best to come up with the right answer, even they'll get one reward. And if you're following that opinion, you're not in the wrong, because you're following a legitimate scholar, a qualified scholar. So that's just a quick basic understanding of what madhhab is and what sects are. And yeah, I hope that will suffice, inshallah.